presentation for Modern Media Mogul, How Smart Creators Position Themselves for Impact, Influence, and Income. This is a reprise of a presentation I gave about a week prior to today at a conference, and I thought it went well, and I thought the interest and the information could be valuable to other folks. It's intended for, those smart creators. I know we're all out there watching this. We're smart. Of course we are. We have the intelligence and the ability to do these things if we know what needs to be done. And that's what I'm here for. You're probably already creating content, whether it's part-time or full-time, podcasting, YouTube, TikTok, Pinterest, blogging, Instagram, you name it. These are content creation. And that is the stuff that this presentation is meant to address. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Gordon Firemark. I'm a practicing entertainment attorney of over 34 years now. I'm in my 35th year of practice. Wow. And I'm based in Los Angeles, California, where I spent my career helping creators navigate the worlds of film and television, theater, digital media, you name it. It's been my mission to help folks protect themselves, their work, and their revenue streams so that they can do great things, make great entertainment, news, information, really any kind of content they like, in order to get their messages out to achieve the impact, the influence, and the income that they deserve. And what I do in my legal practice is help with things like business entity structures, corporations, limited liability companies, partnerships, joint ventures. I help with contracts between the creators, the studios, the sponsors, the collaborators, their teams, their vendors, and all of that, and what have you. Plus, I work on copyright protection and licensing, as well as brand protection with things like trademark registration as well. Those are just a few of the kinds of examples that I get involved in. And I also coach creative entrepreneurs, founders, and creators themselves to build solid businesses around their content. And what I want to talk about today is something that I think affects almost everyone who is a creator, whether it's a podcaster, YouTuber, blogger, TikToker, building any kind of audience in any kind of media. This information is going to be for you. So let me ask you this. If your content stopped tomorrow, what would happen with your income? Would it come to a stop eventually, relatively quickly as well? When I asked this question in a live room, I got a big show of hands. Many folks think that, yes, their income would take a hit, a significant hit, because they stop making new content. And that's pretty common among the creator world. Well, that is all because the uncomfortable truth is that most creators don't actually have a business. What they have is a job, a demanding job, one that never really turns off. And it's just not very forgiving or flexible. The fact of it is, if you aren't making content, you are basically not generating income. No content equals no income. And that is a very fragile and dangerous position to be in. Because you don't own your audience. It's not because you're doing anything wrong. It's just the way the system is set up, the way the creator economy was built to work. You don't own that audience, and you don't control how you make the money or when, and your income really does depend on that consistent output, that treadmill of make the content, what I call the content hamster wheel. I'm sure this may feel very similar and very familiar to you, and I just want you to know it's not your fault. It's the way the system was designed and built. So what it means, though, is that you are building what you're building on someone else's land or rented land. That means that even if things are going well, it's marked by fragility. One change to the algorithm or an account issue or a platform shifting its direction and the way it operates. Everything could change overnight. I'm sure many of you have experienced something like this at least once or twice. I'm currently looking at files on my desk for a client with a fairly large, successful YouTube channel that has been completely deplatformed now because of some bogus, malicious takedown complaints by folks that were just sort of out to get this guy. And unfortunately, if you've ever tried to deal with YouTube and rectify these kinds of situations, you know how difficult that can be. It's probably going to need a lawsuit, even just to find out who the malcontents that filed these bogus takedowns are, so we can do something about it. Another colleague, a friend in the podcasting space, had his Facebook accounts and pages turned off, taken down a month or so ago, just because of an alleged mysterious breach of community guidelines violation of community guidelines without any explanation. And it took him many, many weeks in order to get that all restored. Now, fortunately, he had other ways of communicating with his followers and subscribers, but it was a significant hit to his income and drew attention and energy and resources to a problem that shouldn't really have occurred. I've seen podcasters in the health and wellness space, for example, have their entire hosting accounts terminated, just being basically shown the door by their hosting company because there was some allegations of disinformation that they were sharing. And, free speech isn't a thing when it comes to private businesses. They're allowed to do that. So it's important that we have other approaches in place, mechanisms to protect ourselves. The typical content creator cycle is to post something. Maybe you hope the algorithm likes it. You get a little bit of growth, and then maybe even a little ad revenue, and you're monetized. And then you hope that it leads to something more. Maybe it'll go viral. Maybe it'll grow even bigger. And then you post something again, and you do the whole cycle over again. I call this the post and pray method. And it works until it doesn't. And unfortunately, a lot of creators are discovering that it doesn't. So there is another way, though. I want to talk about the media business owner's approach. That is the path where someone is building something that they can own. You start by building an audience. And building an audience, though, is something you actually have to do something in order to own that audience. Building an audience on someone else's platform doesn't do it. You want to create something more, something that you can scale. You're not just creating content. The content isn't the product, it's the tool. It's a lever that you use as you're building and establishing something more significant. Not the end product, it's the means to an end, a means to accomplishing your end, I should say. These folks that are building this business approach to things where they're building assets are really what I call on the cusp of becoming what I call modern media moguls. If they build things right, and they will be people who own that audience, they will own and fully control all of their intellectual property. They will have lots of assets to leverage to make an income. They will own access to their revenue streams and be able to use those whenever they want to, however they want to. Just a couple of examples of media moguls. The not quite so modern prototype for the media mogul, about 100 years ago, 1928, so 98 years ago now. Walt Disney founded a little company to make short films featuring some cartoon characters that he had created. That he was able to get those to be shown before the long-form features in the theaters, and eventually that turned into him creating long-form films and featurettes involving those characters that he's created. But those characters were his intellectual property, things that he could own and leverage, and eventually turn into a merchandise opportunities, as well as his own film company and television programming and theme parks and licensing rights deals, to the point where now Disney is one of the largest media conglomerates in the world. And that is just because he was smart about it from the very beginning and smart about protecting the assets that he was building. Jimmy Donaldson, Mr. Beast, Beast Industries, not just about ads revenue. In fact, his ads business is not really the profitable end of that company. No, what he's doing is making consumer products, branded products that will that he can sell to his audience that he's captured. The candy bars and other kinds of products like nutritional supplements, energy drinks, those kinds of things. Pat Flynn of Smart Passive Income. This was an information products brand from the very beginning, and he used media effectively as a marketing strategy to promote his information products. He has branched out into physical goods and books and courses and other things, and is doing very well for himself. So hats off to you, Pat. John Lee Dumas is another example in the podcasting space with advertising and pay-to-play, where the guests pay him for appearances on the show as part of his business model. But he, too, has branched out into books and journals and courses and memberships and training and coaches and things like that. And there's lots of others out there that names won't necessarily be familiar to you, but who are nonetheless crushing it in their businesses that they've built with roots in media, things like cosmetic lines, health and wellness products, courses, memberships, and more. Now, here's the real question you have to ask yourself. What is it you're actually building? what kind of business is it really? Now just think about this for a second. Maybe jot down some answers, some thoughts, while I break things down a little bit for you. First off, you want to own your audience. And what does that really mean? Well, if you don't own your audience, you really don't own your business. What does this mean? Well, it means that you have to have ways to reach them other than through the platforms where your content lives. And for most, that means a mailing list. Because let's face it, just having followers isn't really that important or valuable. Followers are not assets. They are fragile. They are perishable. They can become unuseful or unavailable over time or even very suddenly. And the bottom line is when it's on the platform, you don't control them or the access to them. That's about the algorithms that are in place to do that, to show them what they're interested in. If those things were to change, the platform, the algorithm, the approach to access, you could lose access to those followers very, very quickly. In fact, you may know someone who's already, you or someone you know may already have experienced this. What you really want is to have a fully owned ecosystem of an email list that you control, a community, something that you control, another way of communicating with those folks and building affinity and camaraderie and engagement. And then you want to turn those folks from audience into leads into customers and clients. So if you already have an email list now, you're doing great, but I want to ask yourself, are you using it effectively? Are you doing everything you can to convert folks who find you on social media, on podcasts, on YouTube, on to get them onto your mailing list? Because really it is a numbers game and we want to do everything we can whenever we can. So the fact of it is most content creators aren't. They are leaking their audience. They are, being discovered every single day and they consume the content and then they're gone because the algorithm has taken them in a new direction or they've forgotten about your content and moved on to something else. Maybe they've even subscribed, but even then, the platforms don't always show all of your content to all of your subscribers. So that's something to really think about. The bottom line here is that attention alone just doesn't pay, at least not very well. So that's a mindset shift we have to get into. Is it's not about the attention. It's not about the follower count or even the view count. It's really, none of those are assets that you can do anything with until you have a way of converting them to things that you can own and then being able to sell them things. The old method of monetization was to sell your audience's attention to advertisers. So you attract the attention, you make your content, which is essentially the bait to attract the fish. And then once the fish are sort of in the right area, then you sell your sponsors an opportunity to put their hook in the water and catch a few fish. That is not the modern media mogul way. That modern media mogul way is to build a catalog of assets, and the email list being the first of them, but that doesn't have to be the end. The audience of yours really doesn't have a lot of value until and unless you can convert them into customers. And to do that, well, you have to have something that you can sell them. And to do that, that means developing products or services. Identify the problems that your audience has and find your solution and create an approach that makes your solution the obvious choice. That's the modern media mogul way. You get your audience to buy your stuff. And unfortunately, what I see all the time is a lot of creators are just doing sort of random approach to monetization. It's not systematic, organized, or disciplined. Things like ads. Well, maybe you've got a big enough audience to make ads profitable or at least collect a little money. But really, it takes tens or hundreds of thousands of viewers and subscribers to really be able to monetize that. And I'll tell you that if you're looking at exit strategies for these content businesses, the subscriber count isn't really what's important to the buyers, the venture capital folks that are getting into this business. They are really looking at revenue, not a subscriber or audience count. Maybe you get a sponsorship or a brand deal here and there on a product somewhere or some kind of thing. But without real structure, what you end up having is this sort of scattershot approach. Be honest, does it sound familiar? Real monetization isn't about the content. Modern media moguls know that the content isn't the product. The attention isn't the product. The subscriber count isn't the product. They know that monetization is about that solution to a real, specific, compelling problem that your audience wants to solve and is willing to pay to solve. That's a product or a service, and you can market that. And when you've done these things, that is when you start to have a system in place, a system that moves people from audience to lead. That's where now you have an ownership of their information on a list that you control. And then you can start you nurture them and welcome them into your world and tell them about your stuff and your motivations and all that, and offer them those solutions. That's how you turn them into customers. It's an intentional process that can't be shortcut or circumvented. Before this can really be done at scale, though, you really need to have some structure in place as protection. This is the stuff that folks mostly don't talk about. But without a business structure, there's no container. You're just throwing stuff out there and hoping for the best. Without a legal structure in place, you are vulnerable. Without legal structure, you are in the scenario where you could actually build something valuable, but not actually own it. Because of some wrinkles in how intellectual property law works and things like that, if you don't have structures in place, you could find yourself either co-owning or someone else owning the material that you've paid or invested resources to make. I have one situation where a client came to me because they're having a dispute with a co-host. This client had started a podcast network and started a bunch of shows. And on one of those shows, he had eventually settled on a particular person as the co-host. That person became a pretty much regular on the show. And eventually they ended sort of butting heads and having a disagreement about how they were going to monetize the show. And, trying to be the bigger man, the original founder, host, network owner said, you know what, we'll do it your way. It's your show too. We'll just do it your way. Well, that guy, that host basically took that as his opportunity to say, no, it's my show and you're out and I'm moving it to a new network. And instead of having a solid structure in place beforehand, what they ended up having was a big old fight, essentially a podcast divorce. They both got to hire lawyers and we all got to fight about it for well over a year before finally arriving at a settlement, which involved a buyout transaction by one of the parties to the other. And basically everybody a little unhappy after having incurred tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. Those kinds of stories, unfortunately, abound in this space. And what happens when you are not structured properly is you wind up being vulnerable to things like bad deals. Your lack of that solid structure or well-designed system leaves you exposed, makes you vulnerable. Bad deals, lack of contracts altogether can be terrible. Not having the proper intellectual property protection and taking the right steps to get those in place, and giving away rights even without realizing it, as almost became the case with that client I was just mentioning. What's basically happening is you've lost your leverage. Creators lose their leverage when they don't have structures in place to protect themselves. And usually they don't even see the trouble coming down the pipe. So I've given you now the three main pieces that you need to have in place to become a media mogul. You have to have an audience, and you have to own and control access to that audience through a mailing list or a community or both. You also need to have something to sell them. That's the monetization component. Some kind of products or services that they are willing to pay for. And maybe the community itself is that, but access to you could be part of that. Coaching could be physical products, merchandise, could be food products, could be anything really. And then you also have to have that structure. That's sort of the keystone of it all. Without that structure, everything else is at risk of falling apart. But here's the thing. Knowing this, knowing what the pieces are, maybe even sort of knowing where they go, that's not the same as actually building your system and your process and your protection structures and so on. And that's where most people get stuck. The bottom line is that you need a system in place. You actually need that system to create the structures to protect you and an environment for growth, to shield you and your assets. Maybe it's a limited liability company. Maybe it's insurance packages. Maybe it's good contracts, or probably a combination of all of those. You need a system in place to help you safely build out your team and onboard them with the right kind of contracts that will protect your ownership interests in everything that they are doing for you. You need the system in place to create and protect your intellectual property and build assets that will give you leverage for owning your audience, developing and offering products that solve their real problems. All of this is aided and assisted by having systems in place. A system that brings all of this together with a clear plan and a real structure, that allows you to move forward with confidence and actually take bold action toward your goals. Because the saying is true, fortune favors the bold. Absolutely. And that's why I put together a little something. It's a free Media Mogul Method playbook. It walks you through the full system that I've developed, and it helps you start mapping it out for your own business. You can grab it right now. There's a code on the screen. You can go to the link on the screen. That's mogulmethodplaybook.com, or just scan the QR code with your phone and put in your information. And this really is a great next step if this resonated for you. And inside, I've also added some information about my Mogul Method masterclass workshop that I'll be hosting periodically for folks that are really ready to go deeper. You can head on over there and check that out as well. That's makeamogul.com. So if you are ready to get off the content hamster wheel and start building a real business that will sustain, that will grow, and that will produce revenue for you, even when you're not there consistently and constantly producing new content, pushing out more episodes, videos, social media posts, what have you, well, let's do it. Let's build a business that is not just a content creation job. Check out the Media Mogul Method Playbook. Here it is again on the screen, mogulmethodplaybook.com. And let me know if you have any questions. Drop them in the comments and I'll try to get back and respond to you. And if you'd like to get a hold of me, here's some more information about how to reach me. And with that, I'll say thank you very much for being here. I appreciate you. See you again soon.